Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at a plus 12 streets that we two-chested. I did this with a bunch of pugs. Um, and because it's the first WoW video I've made in a while, I want to take some time to talk about some stuff here at the beginning of the video. It's probably just going to be 3 or 4 minutes, but I will leave a timestamp in the description if you don't care about this preamble stuff, if you don't really care about the channel as a whole or me as a person or whatever. No hard feelings. I totally get it. You're here to watch some Shadow Priest gameplay and hear what my commentary is. So go ahead and click that timestamp in the description if you want to skip to the start of the key. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and talk about a couple things before we get into this. These are more like meta things. First off, it's been about 2 years since I played World of Warcraft in any capacity more than just like ultimate casual, right? So the last raid that I did before this one, before Mana Forge Omega, was I think it's called Aberrus. I don't even remember the name. It's the one with Razageth. I did that raid with an old guild of mine called Trash Can on Thrall, just a bunch of friends from years and years ago, and they're cutting edge, so they're not like crazy casual or anything, but there was no it was basically my retirement home, right? I wasn't going super hard and I wasn't trying to learn everything. I was just playing for fun. And then after that tier, I quit and went to do more real life stuff. And things have changed in my real life in a significant way over the last couple years, to the point where I felt that it was a good time. I have enough free time and things are stable enough that I could come back to playing WoW. So I'm going to start making more Shadow Priest videos again. I've also had some friends who are like, dude, you should really get back on making those. I thought they were great and helpful. So I'm doing this for them as well. But then the second reason, and probably the most important reason for why I'm making these videos, is for me personally. So to improve, this is the advice that I give anyone who's ever asked me about how to get better at anything in general. So it's a very broad stroke, but to improve at anything, excuse me, I'm so sorry. I'm going to try to minimize the throat clearing as much as I can, but it will happen. I've got some stuff going on. So the advice that I give anyone who's trying to get better at anything is, if you can record yourself, then do record yourself, and then watch it back at a future time when you're not as emotionally invested, when you have a decent chunk of time to really dive into it and analyze what's going on. And this is true heavily for video games, but it's also true just across life in general. In video games, a lot of the times you're not super emotionally invested, right? I play WoW for fun. This isn't my livelihood. I don't, well, anymore. I don't really care about like, um, oh man, I did 8 million DPS instead of 12 million DPS. I feel like such a bad person, etc. Right? I don't have much emotional attachment to this, if any at all. So it's really easy for me, at least, to watch these videos back and kind of have a step back, more objective perspective, and look at myself and be honest about, oh wow, that was a really dumb thing to do. I should have done this, and kind of pinpoint those things without feeling bad about it. But there are things in life, like maybe you're doing a business presentation and you want to get better at public speaking, or something like that, where you did like a technical interview and you recorded it and you want to understand how you can do better in the future, and those things you could be really emotionally invested in. And I would say for those situations as well, this advice still stands. It's important to record things so that you have an objective recollection of exactly what happened. So you're not just going off your memory, because your memory is 100% of the time biased. You think, oh man, I said that really dumb thing, and then you watch it back in a video, and maybe it doesn't come across as dumb as you thought it was, right? So to have an objective record of what happened, and then try your hardest when you're watching it back to remove yourself from the situation. Think of it like it's a robot doing whatever you were doing, and you're trying to tell the programmer who programmed that robot what they should tell it to do differently so that it can be better, right? And maybe that's just my weird way of compartmentalizing or whatever, but that's one way that I've found with emotionally invested things to remove yourself from it and be able to look at it analytically and objectively, or as objectively as you can, right? Because you're never going to get fully out of the picture. So those are my reasons for why I'm making this video. I am planning on making more of these in the future. I'm coming back to WoW in a not super hardcore capacity, but definitely, I'm raiding again, and I'm wanting to get better at the game and things like that. So expect more of these videos in the future. And then also, if anyone watches these videos and my Iron Man videos from RuneScape, I will be making more of those. They're just really slow and really hard to make. I'm not as gifted at doing that, so there will be more of those in the future. I am still playing RuneScape. It's a great second monitor game, but um, I would expect probably like 9 of these videos, maybe 8 of these WoW videos for every one Iron Man video that I make, because they take so long and there's so much time investment and all of that stuff in those. Okay, so again, I apologize for any throat clearing stuff that happens. I'm dealing with some stuff. I will try to mute my mic whenever I can if I know it's going to happen, but hopefully it's not too disgusting or too like painful on the ears or whatever. Let's get into the run. Okay, so I forgot one last thing before we get started. I did just recently get this new tool. I wanted to show it off real quick. If I press Control 2, I get a cursor that I can use to draw, a little pen. I can do different colors. I can do I can make boxes. I can make straight lines, and I can make arrows. And this tool is called Zoom It. It's just a basic Microsoft tool that you can download from their website. I'm planning on using that. We'll see how it turns out, but I'm planning on using that to really take it to the next level as far as the analysis goes on these videos. And maybe I'll do it in some of my like longer form. I mean, you guys know that my videos are kind of long form anyway, but maybe I'll do it in my like hour long deep dives into a key or a boss fight or something. But I just think that that could be a sweet tool. So let me know what you guys think about that. And I'll leave a link to Zoom It. It's just from Microsoft's website, so I'm not being paid to like advertise this or anything. I just think it's a really sweet uh, little tool that not a lot of people know about. I didn't know about it, and it seems like the kind of thing that would have helped me a lot in the past. So I'll leave a link to it in the description if you want to look at it, check it out yourself. It can do other things. It's meant for like presentations, for like professional presentations. So it can do like you can magnify your screen. I think I could do it. Yeah, if I press Control 1 and then I can zoom in with the scroll wheel or zoom out or whatever. I press Control 2 to get the drawing. And like I said, you can change colors. There's some other stuff it can do. You press Escape to get rid of everything. I won't go into it any more than that, but if you see me start drawing on the screen, that's what that is. It's that Zoom It tool. Okay, so now let's get into the key. After 8.5 minutes, these are the talents that I run in every single key. I know that there is some discussion between Archon and Voidweaver. I haven't played much with Voidweaver, but I do know that even at the very, very top end, people are playing it. And I know that people are still playing Archon at the very top end. So I think it's kind of a toss up. And I imagine that a lot of it comes down to exactly what your strategy is going into each key specifically as a whole group, not just as the Shadow Priest, right? Because if you're playing in a comp that has a lot of 1 minute CD windows, that's my understanding is that Voidweaver is closer to a 1 minute CD class. And so maybe it makes more sense to play Voidweaver in that case rather than Archon. Or maybe you're playing with like a Boomkin or somebody who has like 3 minute CDs, and so you're missing. You want to have your CDs more often so that you can fill in those gaps where they're out of CDs. There are considerations to be made for sure, and I don't know all of the little niche nuances for why you would choose Voidweaver over Archon. But I read through Ellipsis's guide on Wowhead, and in his guide he talks about how Archon is kind of your general purpose, always going to be good in pretty much any situation, and how Voidweaver is pretty much in the same spot. And the only real difference that he talks about in that guide is that when you play Archon, you could be punished harder than when you play Void Weaver. When you play Void Weaver, you go into your CDs, you use all of your abilities or whatever, and if you perform only 60% of what you could do, you're not punished as hard as if you do that on Archon. And what I mean by that is, if you're playing Archon, then the number of Void Bolts that you can cast directly affects how long you stay in Void form, and that directly affects your damage, right? If you cast 8 out of the 10 Void Bolts you could have cast, then your Void form is going to be 80% as long as it would have been, and you're going to get less damage out of it, because when you're in Void form, your mastery is applied to all targets as though you have all 3 dots on them, and that's a huge deal. You're outside of Void form, you're pretty much never attacking multiple targets with all 3 dots on them. It's really rare. You can sometimes keep up Devouring Plague on 2 targets, and you're getting all 3 dots worth of mastery on those 2. But if you're ever in like a 4 plus mob pull, you're not going to have your full mastery, all 3 dots on all of those targets. But you do when you're in Void form. And so staying in Void form as long as possible, that's a huge, huge deal. And that's why you get punished more if you can't keep up the Void Bolt count like you should be. So that's one of the, at least for my understanding, that's one of the big differences between Void Weaver and Archon, is that Void Weaver is less punishing if you're not playing super optimally, and Archon is a little more punishing, but can also be more rewarding, right, if you do it correctly and do it well. Okay, so this is the first pack of the dungeon. I don't think any class would ever hold CDs on this first pack, so you're just going to send them. I like to target, you can target the main Gate Warden guy before the RP is over, so I like to target him before he stops doing his RP and he's actually attackable, so that as soon as he's attackable, I can send a Shadow Crash and, get into my CDs. There's not much to say about this. Obviously, you just dodge those little grenade things or whatever. And then here, this is kind of what I'm talking about as far as the punishing thing. As soon as I can hit something with a Void Bolt, I do. Because you need to be sending as many Void Bolts as possible, pretty much always. We lust on this pull, so maybe this would be an argument for why you could save CDs, or maybe this would be a spot where Void Weaver would be better. If I had known coming into this key that we were going to do that first pack and then we were going to do a big lust pull, I probably still would have done it the way that I did do it, which is send my CDs initially and then just go into this pull with lust and still have Void form or whatever. But you could maybe argue that you should, maybe send your Halo or your Halo, and if you're playing Mindbender, just 1 minute CDs on that very first pull. I dropped to 100k HP right there, by the way. Don't know how I managed to stay alive. I have used my health potion already. But yeah, so maybe you would send your 1 minute CDs and then send all of your actual CDs on this pack with Lust. But that's the kind of thing where when you're in a pug, you could try to communicate that before the key starts. You talk to your tank and look at whatever MDT route they link or whatever. Or you can just kind of wing it and expect things to be similar to how they usually are, whatever the common meta is. And I would say that if you're in a pug and you haven't talked about it, your best bet is to use your CDs pretty much as often as you can. You want to get as many uses of them as possible in ways that make sense. So this is a great example of me doing the opposite of what I'm preaching right now, which is we pulled this pack, and because it's been a while since I've done this key, and I'm not super familiar with the layout of this dungeon yet, I thought that this pack was the last pack before the boss, and it is kind of, but after this pack, there's a mini-boss that we have to fight, and then we're fighting the boss. So if I had understood that, then I would have sent my CDs, sorry about the bars on there, if I had known that there was a mini-boss after this pack, I would have sent my CDs on this pack, and then had them up for, part way through the boss. But instead, I held them on this pack. I'm going to send them right now on this this mini-boss. I'm going to cast Void Torrent, my Halo, my Shadow Fiend, and then get into my CDs. Also, you'll notice that giant targeting circle, that was my Mind Soothe. I have my on use trinket that I'm using right now as Control Shift 1, and my Mind Soothe is Control 1. So sometimes I'll try to use my on use trinket, but I'll miss my shift, and so I'll just start using my Mind Soothe, and that's a bit of an issue. I could avoid that by putting it into a macro or by changing the keybind to something that's not so that doesn't take 3 buttons. Control Shift 1 is kind of a crazy keybind. And this is kind of what I was talking a mixture of what I was talking about before. I'm in void form right there for probably like 10 seconds or so with nothing to hit, which means that my this void form is not going to be as long as it could have been because I didn't get as many. I had 10 seconds where I couldn't cast void bolt, and obviously that's suboptimal. That means my damage is not going to be what it could have been, right? But that's just the kind of thing where the more experience that you have in a dungeon and the more used to the layout of things you get, the better you'll be at making those decisions and knowing when to use your CDs and things. So I'm not gonna like spend too much more time talking about it because I don't think it was such a huge deal. It's an easy fix, I would say. You just realize, okay, next time I do this dungeon, I just know that before the first boss there is a mini boss. I want to send my CDs before we do the mini boss, and then I want my CDs to come up at some point while we're fighting this first boss. So ideally, if they pull that pack over on the left, you're going to send your CDs on that. You're going to come do the mini boss, and then when the boss is about 80% or whatever it is, you're going to have your CDs again. Something else that I'll mention while we're talking about CDs is that Shadow Priest has changed in a pretty interesting way since the last time I played it, to where this was the case before. I had a pretty popular video on my channel back in Shadowlands that was called something like "How to Plan Your CDs as a Shadow Priest," where I talked about how we had some 1 minute CDs, some 2 minute CDs, and Void Form was a minute and a half back then, and so making sure that you line things up while maximizing the number of uses you got from them was kind of like this balancing act, and it was it was super important to do it right. Um, but these days, Shadow Priest only has 1 minute CDs and 2 minute CDs, and technically Shadow Fiend is a 3 minute CD. But that Shadow Fiend is not crazy important, but it's something that has been kind of difficult to uh, pick up as I've been playing Shadow Priest again, is how important it is to make sure that your 1 minute CDs and your 2 minute CDs don't ever get out of sync, especially in a situation like a Mythic Plus dungeon where, like right now, for example, I'll pause real quick, although it's going to make it hard to see, so maybe I'll actually hit. If you look down here, you can see, or up here, you can see that my Halo is off cooldown, but I still have 46 seconds left on my PI cooldown. That means if I were to press Halo right now, then in 1 minute my Halo will come back, but my PI will be back in 45 seconds, which means that my Halo will come back 15 seconds after my PI has come back. And similarly, my Void form is synchronized with my PI because I use them in tandem always, right? So if I were to send Halo here, which I might, I'm not sure if I do or not, but this is something that I'm trying to get better at. If I were to send Halo here, uh, it's going to throw off my big cooldown window in a minute, because I'm not going to have Halo for it, which means I'm not going to have as many Mind Flay and Sanity procs, and my damage is going to go down for that, right? It's gonna hurt my damage. So we'll see if I end up using my Halo. I did send my Shadow Fiend just there, and yes, I just did use my Halo, which means that now you can see I've got 30 seconds on PI, but 54 seconds on Halo. So the next time I want to get into a big Void Form PI window, I'm either going to have to just concede that I don't have Halo for it, and I'm not going to have as many Mind Flay and Sanity procs, which is a huge deal. Your Mind Flay and Sanity is, it actually blows my mind how they changed Mind Flay and Sanity to be such a crazy impactful spell. But not having those during your main Void Form PI cooldown window is a huge deal. It matters a lot. You really want to have as many of those as possible. So it's very important to keep your Halo in sync with your Void Form and your PI. you can see right here, I'm not in void form or PI yet, and this is actually, I'm kind of getting away with it because we're pulling a bunch of stuff together, so I don't have a ton of time to get into my windows beforehand. And actually, this worked out okay. I saved everything um, for when my Halo came back up, and then I sent my Halo and got into my CD window. And I will say that using Halo when I did before this poll, back when I had 30 seconds left on PI or whatever, that was a mistake, even though it kind of worked out here. And the reason that was a mistake is because if I had needed to get into void form and PI immediately, instead of being able to wait 20 seconds, 30 seconds, or whatever it was, I would have been punished because I wouldn't have Halo up. And then also, even though I was able to hold on to my void form and PI for a minute to get into this, line it up better with this pack, that means that it over the course of the whole dungeon, I've now lost 30 seconds on my PI and void form. And if you do that too many times, then you're just guaranteed to lose casts of those things, right? So void form's on a 2 minute window. If I cast void form every 2 minutes and 10 seconds instead of every 2 minutes, then it only takes 12 times doing that before I only cast, I've only cast void form 12 times when I could have cast it 13 times because I've eaten up that 2 minute gap. Hopefully that makes sense. Maybe I could explain it a bit better, but basically, to maximize the amount of times you can use an ability, and I mean, this is true for every ability, but it only really makes sense to talk about it in respect to cooldowns. To maximize the amount of times that you can use your cooldowns, you need to use them as frequently as possible. That should just be common sense, right? So if you have to sit on your cooldowns for any amount of time, just know that you're eating into the final use of your cooldowns near the end of the dungeon because you could have used it 10 seconds, 20 seconds earlier. So that may or may not come into play during this key. It's the kind of thing where you'd really have to break things down to be able to know exactly, you know, how many casts you lost. And it's the kind of thing where if you have details going, you could open up details after the key and look at how many times you cast Void Eruption during the key, and then compare that to the total length of time that it took to do the key. And you're going to want, when you're looking at that afterward, just take however many minutes it took to do the key. So let's say it takes 30 minutes, and then divide that by 2, and you should be around that many Void Eruptions, right? Because if it takes 30 minutes and you use Void Eruption, I think you could technically do it 16 times, because I think your first one starts at 0, right? And so then you'd go 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, all the way up to 30, which would give you 16. So if you did it completely perfectly, you would have 16 Void Eruptions. If you have 15, then you know you missed one, and anything below that, you know you missed even more, right? So if you've got only 13, then technically you could have cast Void Eruption two or three more times during the dungeon than you did. And there are other things to consider. That's kind of a good benchmark that you can look at, but that's not necessarily telling the whole story, because there are keys where, for example, there's some RP that happens and forces a 30-second cooldown where you have to just wait and you couldn't cast the ability even if you wanted to because there's nothing to hit, right? There are keys like that where you can't just say one-to-one, oh, this key took 30 minutes, I didn't cast 16 Void Eruptions, so I did something wrong. You have to look at them individually and say, well, could I have cast 16 actually? And this is something where if you have a recording like this, then you can go through and see, okay, right now it's 12:12. That means, so actually this is a great example. We're 12:15 into this key, which means that 15 seconds ago, if I was playing exactly perfectly, quote unquote, where I was sending my Void Eruption and my PI as soon as they came off cooldown, literally to the second every single time, then I would have cast my PI and my Void Eruption 15 seconds ago, right? Because I would have casted it 0-0, I would have casted it 2 minutes, and then every 2 minutes after that. And this would have been my 7th cast of Void Eruption and PI. But as you can see, my PI, my Void Eruption, and my Halo have 6 seconds left on their cooldowns, which means that I'm about 21 seconds behind where I could be as far as casting my cooldowns. So hopefully that's making more sense. I think I've explained that kind of decently. And whether or not, so I'm going to go into my CDs right now, which is good. Like I was saying before, you want to maximize as many as you can, but also you need to take into account the circumstances of the dungeon and decide whether it actually makes sense to cast Void Eruption and PI at this time. So, for example, in this dungeon, we're in the middle of a boss fight. We're actually pretty close to the end of a boss fight. Um, I had, half health or so on this boss that I could use my CDs on. There's an argument here that I shouldn't have sent my cooldowns here, and I should have saved them for this next pull. Imagine this next pull was going to be 15 mobs that are really hard hitting, and we're going to use Lust on it because Lust is up. I don't have the Lust CD. There's an argument there that, and I'm also still in Void form and not hitting anything, right? There's an argument that I don't get great value out of this Void form, but I think the stronger argument in this situation specifically is that I was 21 seconds behind on that Void Eruption on that CD window, and if I had not been 20 seconds behind, I would have gotten a lot more value out of that CD window, and that CD window makes sense to be there. So I think that what I did in this situation was the correct choice, because if I don't send my CDs at the end of that last boss, then I'm pushing back my next use even further, so I'll be more than 21 seconds off and closer to losing an entire usage throughout the dungeon. And this pack, I had Halo for this pack. I was still in Void form when this pack started, so I did get a little bit of value out of it. And yeah, so basically what I'm saying is there's a lot of analysis that you have to do to understand whether what you did was correct or not. And like I said before, as a general rule of thumb, use your cooldowns as many times as possible, period, right? So even if you're going to get a little bit of a suboptimal use, or if you're going to be, like if you're on a boss fight that's almost dead, there are times, like in Halls of Atonement, for example, there's a great example. The boss, the second to last boss, where you've got those jars and it spawns that ghost that chases you around, on that boss, a lot of the time, I don't know what the reason for it is, but a lot of the time your cooldowns will come up on that boss when that boss has like 25% HP left or something like that. The tank told us here to stay outside. This is going to be a really big pull, so it's nice that I have my cooldowns here. And this is going to be the kind of thing, again, if you watch, I'm going to try to Vampiric Touch a bunch of these before they all get stacked up, so that when I send my Shadow Crashes, they can hit other things that don't have my Vampiric Touch on them, and I can be doing more damage. There are a couple of mobs, you can't see them under the nameplate stack, but there are a couple mobs here that I don't have Vampiric Touch on, and that's just straight up a mistake. That means I'm doing 0 damage to those extra mobs. Even though I'm and not technically 0, because like I said before, this Tendril is casting Mind Sear, and that Mind Sear is hitting the other mobs. So I am doing a little bit of damage to them, but I'm doing 0 Psychic Link damage, and your Psychic Link damage in AoE situations is like a huge portion of your damage. It's like pretty much all of your damage in AoE. Let's see if I can remember what I was saying right before that. I don't think I can. Hopefully it was something that was smart and was helpful. Okay, so we're going into this boss. I'm sure I was talking about cooldowns still, because cooldowns are just such a big, important subject to get right. On this boss, there are some pretty interesting things you can do as a Shadow Priest. I like to fade every single one of these group soaks, because it reduces the damage you take, and there's not really a great time. You could fade for the fan mail cast as well, but fading on every one of those money soaks is a pretty good move. The other thing that you should be doing that I think a lot of people don't utilize is you can cast Flash Heal on yourself, and that gives you, I don't remember the name, I don't think it's Body and Soul. I think that's the one that you get when you use Power Word Shield on yourself. But you get, if you Flash Heal yourself, you get a buff. You can see, this is the public Public Priest. This is his weak aura suite. And when I cast Flash Heal on myself, you'll see up here at the top, it's this thing. This 987, that, where is it up here? It's this. That is a buff that you get that reduces the amount of damage you're taking. You get it when you cast Flash Heal on yourself. So I would say that's something that if you're progressing Mythic, or if you're doing a really high Mythic Plus, or you're trying to figure out other ways that you can stay alive for a mechanic that's going to hit really hard, even if you're at full health, shooting a Flash Heal on yourself right before damage comes out is generally a good move. And this again is general. There are times where this isn't true, but generally it's worth it to lose one GCD. Like I just Flash Healed myself there and I Mass Dispelled everybody. I should be standing in that Spirit Link. I just cast Fade, so I'm going to be taking less damage from this, and I have the debuff or the buff from Flash Healing myself, so that didn't hurt as bad as it could have. But what I was saying is, it's generally better to send one GCD, to use one GCD to cast Flash Heal on yourself, even though that's going to do 0 damage to the enemy, right? Your DPS is going to suffer 1 GCD's worth if you cast Flash Heal on yourself instead of casting, let's say, a Mind Blast or whatever other damaging ability. It's generally worth it to use a Flash Heal on yourself, especially if it makes the difference between living and dying, right? If you die, this is kind of my general outlook on raiding and on anything in WoW. You do, even if you, let's say you are really, really bad at playing your class, let's say you can do maybe like 40% of your optimal damage that your class could do. If you stay alive, then you're doing 40% of the optimal damage, right? And let's say your optimal damage is 100, 100 DPS, and you can do 40 DPS. If you can stay alive, then you can do 40 DPS through the whole fight. If somebody else could do 100 DPS, but they die, then they're going to do 100 DPS for however long, and then 0 DPS for the rest of the fight. And there is a balancing act there, right? Obviously, the lower damage you do, the worse, but I guess this is just to say that staying alive should be your number one priority as a DPS, and really as any character in WoW. It should be your number one priority, because you do 0 DPS when you're dead, you do 0 HPS when you're dead, you hold 0 threat when you're dead, right? Obviously dying is way worse. And it's something that, on paper, like when you say, would you rather your character stay alive or die? Obviously, anyone you ever asked that would say, stay alive. But in practice, people don't always obey that. They don't prioritize that, right? How many times have you seen somebody die in World of Warcraft because they've tried to greed an extra global? Oh man, if only I can get this last flame strike off, then I'll do 100 parse instead of a 99 parse, right? They try to greed that last flame strike, they get hit by the mechanic, and they're dead for the next 2 minutes of the fight. And then their parse, which would have been a 99 had they stayed alive, which is a really good parse. And not only that, not only for the sake of like bragging rights, but doing a 99% parse means that the whole boss fight is going to be easier for your entire team, and your team is more likely to kill it, right? So strictly ethically speaking, you would prefer a 99% parse over a 100 parse if trying to go for the 100 parse means you die for the next 2 minutes and you actually get a 65 parse or whatever, right? So that's something that I try to keep in mind at all times when I'm especially a DPS player, but as a healer or as a tank as well. It's super easy to say, and everybody would always agree with you that yes, you should stay alive at all times, but many people don't play that way. Many people think, oh man, if only I can get this next cast off, we're going to be super good. And then they die, right? So I can't stress it enough. Prioritize living. They call them live lords. I love live lords. Okay, so going into this boss fight, this was a little unique for me. Every time I've done this boss in the past, the healer has been on the drums, but for some reason the drums are the only thing that was left open when I got here. So I was unsure going into this boss fight. When the rotting food comes out, I didn't know if that was going to hit me for being on the drums or not. My assumption was that when a healer is on the drums, the rotting food wouldn't hit them. But I know that there are some mechanics. This is the rotting food. It just hit our hunter guy. I know there are some mechanics that target healers specifically or target DPS specifically or things like that, right? And so I was worried that because I'm a DPS, I've only ever seen healers play the drums. Because I'm a DPS, I was like, does that mean I'm going to start spawning rotten food on myself? Whereas a healer doesn't have that problem, and that's why they can do the drums. So I was a little worried going into it, and there are a couple times during this boss fight where I get off the drums because I'm like nervous about what's going on, and then I get back on them and keep going. Um, you can cast everything from the seat of your drum throne is what they call them. I actually play the drums in real life, and I just started and they call it a drum throne instead of like a stool or whatever. I think is pretty cool. So you can actually cast all of your abilities while you're sitting on your drum throne, uh, and it does cancel things like the pull back and stuff like that. So see, this is where I got off of it because that's the other thing I forgot to mention. When I'm on the drums, it gets rid of my entire weak aura suite. So right now, this is the only spot where I can see how much insanity I have, and I can't see any of my cooldowns or anything. This is the kind of thing where I imagine the weak aura group that Public made uh, is just triggered to not load when you're in a vehicle, because I imagine this is technically a vehicle. Like right here, I'm about to get hit by this frontal, so I move. I'm not sure if I actually needed to move or not, being in the drums, but I moved anyway because, like I was saying before, we love live lords, and you would much rather get out of the drums, lose DPS for 3 seconds while you run away, and then get back to the drums and able to do damage for the rest of the fight. That's way better than just sitting there on the drums and thinking, well, it probably won't kill me, and then you die, right? I don't actually know still, as I'm making this video, whether I would have died there or not, but I would say, so I guess what I would say the best thing to do would be is go into this on an M0 or some low, maybe heroic even or something, and then test it so that you know whether or not it does kill you, and then play accordingly. But if you don't know, like it's going to happen here again, I don't know if that's going to kill me or not, so the safe play and the better play, in my opinion, is to just get out of the way. Um, until I can test it or talk to somebody, or maybe one of you guys will leave a comment even and let me know. Until I know whether that would kill me or not, I'm always going to get out of the way, get off the drums and run away because living is so much more important than getting that next little 3 note tempo thing or getting off my next void bolt or whatever. It's way more important to stay alive. Okay, so we've got 5% trash left. Um, and then we're going to go up to the last boss, Soazmi. I apologize that I haven't been talking too much about like dungeon specific stuff. That's something that I'll try to adjust for the future. I think that the stuff that I have been saying about cooldowns and about staying alive and about recording yourself and analyzing how you do things, I think all of that stuff is important and good to learn, and maybe stuff that uh, isn't talked about super often. Um, so I don't think it's been a complete waste of time. Hopefully you don't think so either. But I will in the future try to, especially as I get more familiar with the dungeons, I'll try to put in some dungeon specific tips for things that I'm thinking about while I'm doing the key. So something I will mention, we can check in on this again now, is last time we checked, it was 12 minutes and 21 seconds before I could use my CDs. I've lost almost another 40 seconds since over the course of this dungeon. The next time my CDs are going to be available, you can see I've got 18 seconds left, 17 seconds left, and 26 seconds left. So my Halo and my PI and Void Eruption are not synced. They're off by about 8 seconds, which, and I will mention, this is something that is really hard to do. I've noticed, I've only been playing the game again for maybe close to a month, but it's difficult to remember that these need to stay as synced as they can be. So, for example, with Halo, that's the only thing that makes this hard. Is with Halo, your Halo will come up, and it'll be like while you're running between packs or something, or you're in a situation where there aren't very many enemies that you're attacking, and so you'll think, well, does it really make sense to send Halo here? It's going to give me like 4 Mind Flay Insanities or whatever, but what am I going to use those on? You know, even if, especially if you're like running between packs, you're like, I can't hit anything right now at all. Does it make sense to use Halo here? And generally, again, this is a very broad stroke that you need to think about while you're playing and kind of analyze on a case by case basis. But I would say generally, you do want to send it so that it stays in sync with your PI and your Void Eruption, so that when you get into a situation where you want to send your VI and your PI and Void Eruption, you also have Halo, because Halo makes that cooldown window so much more impactful. So that's what I would say. I'm about like, it's going to be like 27 minutes before I can use this set of cooldowns, which should have happened at 26 minutes. So I'm about a minute off, and if that goes on for too long, if I get to a point where 28 minutes was going to come around and I don't, before I use my next CDs, then I will have lost an entire cast of my CDs, which could happen. You know, I don't know exactly how it went. I could already be at that point. It could be that this is I'm on number 14 or whatever it would be for 26 minutes, and I've only cast 12. You know, that's something that you might want to go through. If you record yourself playing, you might want to go through and just quickly like scrub across the timeline and say, okay, when did I use, and this is something that logs would be good for as well, when did I use all of my Void Eruptions, and how can I adjust to make sure I'm using them at good times? If you have logs, logs will show you that as well. You should be able to pop open your report on Warcraft logs, and it should be very uniform. 0 minutes, 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 6 minutes, right, as it goes through. Assuming all of that other stuff, those caveats that I mentioned before, also hold true. Like, you actually have mobs that you can be hitting, and you're not saving your CDs for a lust pull or like a very important patrol or something, and you're just trying to send them as often as possible. So it turns out that this worked out okay. I have my CDs for the start of this boss, which is probably more important than having my CDs for that pack we just killed. Although I put +2, but it looks like we're going to +1 this dungeon. So my bad. I guess I thought we +2'd it, but we +1'd it. But yeah, so if I had sent the CDs back at 26 minutes, I ended up sending them at 28, so I 100% lost at least one cast of Void Eruption and PI just due to... let me pause this real quick so I can talk about this Shuri mechanic, although I imagine people are super familiar with it by this point and don't really care about what I have to say about it. I have 100% lost at least one use of my cooldowns because I saved that till 28 minutes. I didn't have it at 26 when I should have had it, and then I ended up using it at 28, which is when I would have had I used it at 26, it would have come up by 28 anyway. So I've definitely lost at least one. The thing I was going to say about the Shuri mechanic is just that it's very interesting how many different ways you can react to how many ways you can solve each of these puzzles. Like here, for example, maybe this isn't a great... I'll pause right here. You can see that square and circle were really close to each other, and so I could just go through square, and now I'm inside the circle. But also, had I been positioned differently, this is something I guess that I really like about this mechanic. Had I been positioned differently, like further, I think circle's kind of over here, I could have just gone through, waited a little bit longer. Yeah, I could have waited a little bit longer and just gone through circle, right? Now we're going to go through triangle to get over to that side, and that was actually, so I'll go back a little bit, that was actually arguably a mistake. As you can see, the divide is right here. Square that we just came through is on the other side of the divide, so when he jumps to the other side of this wall, I could just step 2, and actually let me use my little fancy arrows. I could just go here. Maybe that's not super easy to see. I'll make it blue as well. I could just go into that square, and it would take me... Oops, this is going to be in the wrong direction. It would take me over to there. I'm just trying to find an excuse to use this thing. And this is a shorter distance than what I end up doing, which is he jumps across, and instead of just going through square, I turn and I see that he's by triangle, so I make this run over to, oh, let's see. I go like this all the way over to here. I use my goblin jump to make it faster, and then that takes me over to here. So this distance is definitely further than if I had just gone through square. But that's the kind of thing where um, it's hindsight is 2020. I wasn't thinking about square being on the other side of the divide. Usually what I do is whenever he jumps, I look for the closest marker and then try to find the corresponding one and go through it. And like I was saying at the beginning of this, this mechanic is nice because there are multiple ways to solve it. I could have gone through square and that probably would have been better, but going through triangle, which pretty much everyone in the group does, or at least three, four, yeah, all of us do, um, that is a valid solution as well. It works out. We get to keep doing the boss or whatever. And the other thing to consider is that he's going to divide the room in half again into quarters. And if I had gone through square, I would not be in the same quarter as my whole team, and I would have to make some kind of movement to, get with my team at that point. So there are things to consider there. I think it probably in this exact case, the correct move would have been to go through square because then I'm just instantly back hitting the boss, and I can move my way across over time or whatever. Triangle is now free. I go through triangle. I don't like this part about the Shuri mechanic, which is that you have to wait for the boss to run over. It feels bad losing uptime. I guess ideally your tank would go through first. You guys would stay hitting the boss for as long as you could until the tank gets to the other side, and then you would go through. Let's actually look at this one. So here, yeah, here there's only one solution because you're never going to get to circle. So you have to just go square, triangle as soon as it's passed over this. I guess technically, if you guys wanted, and maybe this would actually be the better move. It depends, I guess, on where the boss jumps, if he ends up jumping here. Maybe the best move in this situation would be, instead of trying to get the boss over to that corner, you just wait until the ring passes over square, and then you just make one move, and then you're in this quadrant. But let's see, I'm pretty sure that he jumps, and we have to cancel the double technique thing. So I go through square early so that we can get through triangle. And yeah, he does end up doing the double technique to come over here anyway, so it's probably best that we just went through triangle anyway. I was pretty sure this is where he ended up. But there was an alternative there where we could have gone just through square and stayed in that corner. But then if he had come over to here anyway with his double technique, we could have just moved, and gone through the next one. This one's a super easy solution as well. The boss is dead anyway, but you would just go through circle and boom, you're over there. Okay, so that's the dungeon. I appreciate everyone who's stuck around. I appreciate all of the support that you guys have given me over the years, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!